Well, hey guys, welcome this morning. My name's Aaron. I'm one of the pastors here at Grace. If I haven't met you before, I would love to do that. Love to hear how you got here, how you made your way to Grace, and even a little bit of your story if I could sometimes. So if this is your first weekend, make sure I would love to meet you before you head out today. Also, I want to let you know you can stop by our welcome desk for a couple of reasons. One is we have a free gift for you, so would love for you to grab that. We also have a lot of information just about Grace, the things that we do here, and it might answer a lot of your questions you have if this is your first time or first couple times here. So make sure you stop by and do that. Let somebody know your name. We just love to know that you were here. Well, guys, thanks for being here this morning. Before I kick off things, I want to let you know about one thing coming up here soon. So if you were with us last week, you actually got to see some baptisms, which is super fun. One of my favorite things to do as a church is to celebrate life change together. And one of the ways that we do that is through baptism. So we had two people get baptized last weekend. It was super fun to celebrate that together and to just see people taking the next step in their faith. So along those lines, I want to let you know that there is a baptism class coming up here on July 18th, all right? This doesn't mean that if you come to the class, you're committing to being baptized and being on video and all of that. What this is a chance to come and learn about baptism. If you're like, I don't know much about baptism, to hear what we believe about baptism, and even explore the possibility of being baptized if you haven't before. So I would encourage you, whatever stage you're in, if you haven't been baptized, you're even thinking about it in the slightest bit, even if it just sounds interesting to you, I would love to have you come to that class. It'll be during our 9 a.m. service. I'm teaching it, so if you don't like me, you don't have to come. You can just go to the next one. Spoiler alert, I teach that one too. But anyways, would love for you guys to come if you're interested in baptism. And you can go to our website, find out more about it, even sign up there to come. And we'd love to have you guys check that out. So we started a new series here last weekend called ReWired. Really excited about this series. A couple of things that we kind of explored here is we're looking at following Jesus, right? We talk about that a ton here at Grace. But when we start to look at what that actually means, what we actually start to hear are things that we do when we follow Jesus. So if you've been to church before, you might hear or observe things that people do that are following Jesus. Your parents might have taught you things to do. You might have even heard them referred to as spiritual disciplines, right? So it sounds very intimidating and astute. But really what we're talking about is the things that we do when we follow Jesus. What does that look like? And what we're trying to do in this series is to look back at those things that are very, very important things, but we want to look at how we're actually engaging them. So as we look at each of these individual things here over the coming weeks, we kind of set a goal last week. The goal of following Jesus is to become like him. So even as we engage these things that we might do in Christian life or at church or during the week, the reason that we would even say these are good things to do, or we would say these are things that we do, is because we're trying to become more like Jesus. And so there are certain things that we would do with the intention of actually putting ourselves in situations or positions where God will change us, where he might be looking at us and we're in a situation where we're saying, God, I'm open to the change in my life that you have. So we're kind of opening ourselves up to that transformation. So we're going to continue doing this series and kind of rework a little bit of how we heard about it. I don't know about you growing up in church, the things that your parents taught you to do or not to do, or the things that you just did on Sundays and not other days. It can be a little confusing to figure out how to totally engage all of these things. So I'm really excited about this. So this week we're actually going to talk about worship. And I want to set us off with a definition that I hope we can land on with a better understanding of what it looks like to worship. I'm not going to preach for 5 minutes. We're going to sing the rest of the time, right? Music is a form of worship that we're probably most familiar with, but it is not the only one. You're like, thank goodness, because I would leave. And that's fine. We'll just put a spotlight on you. I'm just kidding. We wouldn't do that. But when we look at worship, what we're actually talking about here, I want to give us a definition that we're going to work with as we explore this. And this is what I hope we can walk away with. When you and I engage in worship, or you're looking up saying, I want to follow Jesus, I want to be more like him, when we look down the avenue of worship, here's what we're actually doing. Worship is how we express love to God. So if we're saying that I'm going to follow Jesus, it's because I've been affected by what Jesus has done, right? It's become apparent to me that when Jesus said that I have sin in my life and he died for me, he's given me mercy and grace and took that punishment, right? When we look at the idea of salvation and Jesus dying on the cross, what we're doing is saying, when I worship God, I'm not trying to earn anything. I'm not trying to get a better standing with God. It is me expressing love to God. And this is a critical definition here as we move through this. If we're going to worship, we want to do it from the right place. So this is expressing love to God. And it's important because we all have different experiences, right? Some of us grew up and we're like, I engaged in worship because my parents told me that they would ground me if I didn't do the things, right? I engaged in worship because I was in church and suddenly they just kept saying stand and sit, and I just did. I don't know what I did, but I did it. And maybe you're like, I just went to church and it's just what they did. So I just did what they did at church, right? All of these definitions, we have all these experiences. So it's really important for us to work from this idea that we are trying to express love to God. And I don't know if this is helpful for you, but it's helpful for me to think about what it is not when I'm trying to define something. So I want to turn to the book of Isaiah, chapter 29. We're going to be in verse 13 and 14. If you want to turn there, if you have your phone, your Bible, there's also some Bibles under the seats that we have in there. By the way, if you don't have a Bible, we would love for you to take one of those Bibles. No one will stop you at the door and accuse you of stealing. We want you to take that home if you don't have one. Write your name in it, make it yours. We'd love for you to do that so you can kind of follow along with us and even read on your own. So the book of Isaiah, chapter 29, verses 13 and 14. I want to look at what the Lord says about worship here. I think this is really important as we move through this to kind of help us understand something really important. So let's read here in chapter 29, verse 13. Here's what it says. The Lord says, "These people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based merely on human rules they have been taught. Therefore, once more, I will astound these people with wonder upon wonder. The wisdom of the wise will perish, and the intelligence of the intelligent will vanish." I love this because we all have different experiences, right? We've done things that we call worship, right? Our most familiar thing when we do church together is we say we're worshiping on Sunday, right? I'm going to a worship service in the worship center, and we use that word. But what this brings up for us is something very important, because God is saying here that just because they're saying something, right, they're doing the thing, whatever the church will do, whatever was prescribed, but their hearts are far from me. Man, that's really important for us to hear, because here's what becomes something that we have to remember as we think about worship. Worship is not about the thing that we do. It's about the position of our heart when we do it. Right? When God is affecting our lives, when he wants a relationship with us, what he is after is our heart. So as we engage in worship, even as you engage in worship here on Sunday mornings, I want you to hear me. It is not about the thing you do. It is about the position of your heart while you do it. What's exciting about this is that this is the reason that we look at following Jesus, and we're saying we want this to be a lifestyle. We want Jesus to be a part of my life. The reason that worship can move off of just a Sunday morning and music is for this very reason, because it's about the position of my heart. So when I love Jesus and I'm expressing love to him, that can open a lot of things up to be worship, right? It starts to become a broader thing that we can do. I love this too. In Romans, it kind of tells us, man, so if I want to make this part of my life and I want to start to do it between Sundays, because let's be honest, all right, when you leave here on Sunday afternoon and you go home, a lot of stuff happens between Sunday and Sunday, right? Life goes up and down. Life blows up. Life might be fine sometimes, but a lot of life happens in a week. So, man, if I want to express love to God when things are good, when they're bad, all of these things, right, my life is changing. So I don't necessarily want to wait until Sundays. And here's another thing, right? Most of the time when we worship on Sundays, we're celebrating, right? We're celebrating the bigger promises of God. And depending on what life happened between Sunday and Sunday, it can feel a little interesting to celebrate. So we want to look at what does it actually look like now if I want worship to start to make me more like Jesus. I love what Romans says here. Chapter 12, verse 1 says, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. I love this because it plays out a couple things we've talked about here. First of all, that when we worship, right, is in view of God's mercy because of what Christ has done for me, right? It's a response to what he has done. Not earning anything. I'm not being better with God. I'm doing it in response to him. And I love this as we talk about it, this idea of our body being a living sacrifice. What that starts to mean is that my entire being, right, my life is going to be outpouring of love to Christ, right? I'm going to be expressing love to him with my whole life, right? I don't have to do anything weird and wear a t-shirt that's like, this body is a living sacrifice. Like, please don't actually do that. It's a little weird. But internally, what we start to think about is in all areas of my life, worship and expressing love to God starts to become a part of that. And that starts to become the challenge. What actually starts happening is worship starts to be a response to real-time events. So Monday when I go back to work and all my problems are waiting for me, I want to worship, right? I want to figure out how to do that. When I go through the week and a friendship blows up, I want to figure that out with my family, right? I'm on the way to the hospital. I want to figure it out, right? I want to express love to God because I trust him, but it doesn't always feel just happy, or sometimes I can't wait till Sunday, right? I want to express that love to God. And so I look and say, what has God done in my past, present, and future, right? It's a response to these events. When I think about these items and we talk about it becoming more like Jesus and having a relationship with him, it's really helpful for me to think about it in relational terms. And I think a lot about my kids. I have two boys. They're awesome. My oldest, Zeke, he just turned 3 this year. And all 3-year-olds are they want to be pretty helpful. But Zeke is, I think he has like a gift for helping people. I think it's going to be part of who he is and who God's created him to be. He's just always thinking about how to help people. And toddlers, even when they're trying to help, sometimes it's just like, wow, you have touched so many things with peanut butter on your hands. And so not actually that helpful. But I want to tell you a little story here about my son. He just loves doing anything that I do. I thought my wife and I were talking like, isn't it weird that like this whole human just likes everything that I like because I like it? And if I liked any other set of things, he would like that too. So Zeke always wants to help. He always wants to do a project with me. And so it came time to change the oil in our truck. And my 3-year-old knows how to change the oil. So if you need help, just give me a call. I'll loan him out to you. So he wants to change the oil, and so I got this new drain pan that I could put underneath, and it has a drain plug in the top, so it just drains in the bottom. I don't have to like transfer it in anything else. I want to be conscientious of the environment and stuff, so I don't want to spill oil everywhere. So I got this, and so I put it under there, and I went to throw something away. And when your kids are off and they're talking to you, and you're just like, yeah, honey, like you're not really like, you're just trying to like keep the connection there. So I'm off throwing something away in the trash can around the corner, and I hear Zeke. He's going, Dad, I'm helping you. I'm screwing this back in for you. I'm helping you. And so I'm like, yeah, buddy, thank you. You're so helpful. I'm like, I want to encourage that part because he loves doing it so much. And so I get back over there, and we get underneath, ready to take the drain plug out, and I had just driven somewhere. So like for once in my life, the oil's like, it's going to move, right? It's coming out. And so I get the drain plug out. It starts coming out, and quickly I start to see that the oil is not draining, at least not very quickly, into the bottom of this thing. And I was like, well, I undid the drain plug. Oh, I immediately went into cleanup mode. I was like, it's a lost cause, right? It came out so fast. So I realized that as I went around the corner, Zeke was helping me by screwing the thing back in that I had unscrewed in order for the oil to go into that. So very quickly, 5 or 6 quarts of oil were all over the driveway. And so I'm like, for once in my life, I was pretty calm about it. Felt good about that. And so I walked around the front of the truck, and Zeke's like, Daddy, you made a big mess. I was like, yes, son, I made a big mess. I didn't want to discourage him from helping me, right? I didn't want to be like, how could you do it? So anyways, I went and got the towel, started cleaning up, and he was like, man, Dad, shoot, you're really bad at, no, he didn't say that. But I was like, I'm cleaning this up, like my neighbors are, I'm like, someone's going to call the EPA on me, like this is happening. And so we made a day of it. We went to the store and got a bunch of dish soap. I was like, I don't know, they use it on ducks when oil spills, so maybe it'll help the driveway. We're just trying to clean it up and not look like we spilled 6 quarts of oil. So we got that all cleaned up. And man, what an experience. And there's so many things like that happened with that kid. But I started to think about what was actually happening in this situation. And one of the things that struck me is when I think about worshiping God, the importance is the position of our heart. One of the awesome things about our relationship with Jesus is that he knows our heart. Right? The Bible says that God knows our heart. It doesn't matter what other people think about us. Sometimes it does, take showers and stuff. But he knows our heart. So when I'm engaging in worship, God knows exactly the position of my heart. And that's the connection that I want to make with worship. Because here's the thing, worship can get hard. And sometimes we're going to spill oil all over the place, for lack of a better example. But you know what made that not so bad is I knew my son's heart, right? I knew that he was trying to help me. He was expressing love to me. He loves being with me. He loves helping me. And so he was like, I love my dad. He wasn't trying to earn anything from me. He just loves me. And thankfully for him, right, I know his heart. If somebody I didn't know did that, I'd be like, what, do you sabotage me? What are you doing? Right? I kind of felt like that, honestly. But I knew his heart, right? I knew what he was doing. And man, as I think about worship and the journey that worship takes you on in your life, I'm thankful that God knows my heart. Because there are times when I don't feel like it's working. There are times, right? I am thankful that God knows my heart. Because when we start to take worship outside of just a Sunday morning thing that we should do, I'm not maintaining we shouldn't do worship, right? When we should do that. But man, when I try to implement it in my life the rest of the week, it can be hard. And so I want to encourage us in a couple of ways as we think about this. There's a couple of things I think we can remember as we try to absorb this into the rest of our life and maybe view it in a new way that will be very helpful to us. The first thing is this. Man, when worship gets hard and it feels like I don't know what to do, I don't know how to do, I don't know if it's working. When it gets hard, let me encourage you. God does not care how you express love. What he cares is that you keep doing it. When we engage in worship, it's not about getting the right thing, the right formula. I can't give you a perfect plan. I can give you ideas. I can give you helpful things, but what matters is that with your heart, you keep connecting with God and keep trying to express love for him. And if you're thinking about trying this for the first time, you're like, I've honestly never thought about trying to do it during the week. Or if you're like, I have never thought about trying to take it even deeper outside of Sunday morning, let me encourage you, it is going to be hard to miss. Right? One of the helpful things is that there are so many things you can do. I realize that's paralyzing for some people. They're like, so what things then? All of it? Like what? Listen, I am a firm believer that you can cook hot dogs and worship God. Not because hot dogs are great. They got to be all beef, though. But I don't know what you're doing. But if your heart is thankful for something that the Lord is doing, man, your family's there, you're barbecuing, and these hot dogs are great. You're like, man, thank you, God. Right? That is worship. Expressing love to God for what he has done. So it's going to be hard to miss. All right? Do not overthink this. All right? I'm going to give you a sports analogy. All right? The strike zone is huge. So if you want to try to worship, close your eyes and throw it because you're going to do it. When your heart is in the mindset of wanting to express love to God, it's going to be hard to miss because the goal is to express love to him and to keep doing that. But one of the things I want to highlight in this idea is that you have freedom to try. If you want to jam out in your car to the songs you hear, I'm like, do that. If you want to write some things in a journal that you're like, I'm thankful for these things and I'm praising God by writing, do that. If you need to go on a bike ride and enjoy nature to kind of remind you how great God is, do that. Right? Find some things that are helpful for you. Maybe attribute some things to God that you haven't before. I don't know how often in my life I'm like, wow, that was like, I like almost be in a car accident like every day. You know, it's just kind of life here in Northeast Ohio when the roads are blown up. And I'm like, wow, that could have been bad. Like instead of me attributing like maybe God's keeping me safe. Maybe it was almost bad and it's fine and I'm a great driver, above average surely. Right? But maybe God kept me safe. Right, man, a situation in my life like, well, that worked out. Right? Well, maybe it did, but maybe God has a plan for you, right? I don't know what that is, but attributing things to God, it's a vast opening of things that we can do, right? So the goal is to keep trying to express love to God. Here's something else about worship that I find difficult, and I think we don't talk about enough in relation to worship, is the idea that worship, sometimes it costs us something. Sometimes worship feels difficult, like it's going to cost me something in my life. And I want to encourage you with this, that God is worth the cost. I don't know what it is in your life, right? Remember, we're opening ourselves up for God to change us, to transform us. Here's what you're going to start to realize. Seemingly small things for other people are going to feel like a huge win in your life. Maybe you're working on not getting ticked off in traffic at people. And 9 out of 10 times, you're like just sitting there angry and you're clenched on the steering wheel. And one time, you're like, okay, life goes on. And you want to celebrate that, right? God knows how hard maybe you worked for that moment. God knows if you've been praying for life change. I don't know what you're confronted with, because as we embrace the idea of transformation from Christ, and then we read the paperwork on that, and we're like, oh man, God, I didn't know my life was going to change this drastically. And you're struggling with that, and it makes it hard to come to church and sing a song. That's okay, right? Worship, the idea of saying, even so, God, man, I'm on the way to the hospital and it looks bad. God, I know that you're great. God, I know that you are in control. I know that this circumstance is not the last say. I know that this life is not the only life. I know, God, that you are faithful and good. The idea that maybe you're here sitting in a seat today and that's uncomfortable for you because you have a desire to look for what God might have to offer. Man, this is different. God knows what maybe you've given up to follow him. He knows the ways that you've changed that maybe people don't know. God knows the small thing that you've paid the price for in worshiping him, right? The relationship that got hard, the conversations that you've had. God knows those things. Sometimes saying, God, I trust you, so I'm going in to have this conversation. God, I trust you, so I'm going to do this. That is worship. Doing the hard things. So the enduring, right? The showing up, the continuing to acknowledge God when things get hard. It is worth the cost for the hope that he offers us. There's another thing here that I think is a one that really affects us a lot, is this idea that, man, sometimes when life is going a certain way, and maybe I had a plan and it's not going exactly how I thought it would go, and I was hoping God would support this idea that I had. There's nothing wrong with that. But God has taken me another direction. God and I aren't on the same page today. Like, this is difficult for me to believe this thing that God said. It's difficult for me to want to do the transformation that he wants me to do. Man, I don't know about you, but coming to church on those days or standing up and singing, sometimes it feels like, what am I doing? Like, I don't really want to do, like, I don't know if I want to be happy right now. And here's something that's really critical for us to remember as we think about worship that can help us in these times, instead of completely disconnecting from God. That's the hard part, right? Is the idea that worship, it's actually about who God is and what he does. It's not about how I feel about him at the moment. This is helpful for me. There are some days where I am full of praise and I'm like, God, you are so good. There are some days where I'm like, what is going on in my life? I'll give you a practical example of this. I don't know if you guys know this. I play drums. It's one of my favorite things to do. I've been doing it for about 15 years now. And man, you talk about that thing where you feel in your wheelhouse. You're like, this is the thing God has created me to do. This is the gifting that I'm living out. Like, this is clearly who God created me to be. When I think about worship, as I grew up in church and I played worship for like camps and Sundays and all these things, I played a lot of drums. And there was not a time in my life where it felt as easy as that. Being able to do what God created me to do, connect with him in worship, it was my favorite. It is still my favorite way to worship. But you do something simple like take me from a seat here, and put me in a seat 10 feet away, it's a lot more difficult for me. It's not that I'm a bad singer. I just don't enjoy singing. I said that in church. Right? I don't really enjoy singing that much. Some of you are like, yeah, I usually hope the music's loud enough that the person in front of me will not hear my voice. Yeah, that's me sometimes. You miss a note or whatever. Right? I remember going to church and sitting in, like, they're playing the organ thing, and I'm like, I don't even know how to get to these notes from I don't know what's going on, right? It was difficult. Here's my point is that, man, sometimes it's going to feel easy. You're going to feel like you're in your wheelhouse worshiping God, right? That's how it is for me in that. But sometimes it's going to feel harder. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it. What it means is that you and we will have ways that we worship Jesus that will feel more natural to us. That will feel easier, right? There's seasons that'll feel easier. The reason we would sing together and the reason why I would still sing together is because I know that it's a way that I support other people, right? Doing it with them, right? Sharing in other ways to worship, right? These words that I am singing, they are true. And this isn't the most natural way for me to do it, but man, I'm going to find some joy in this because it's not about how I feel about it. It's about who God is and what he does in our lives. So man, this starts to look a lot of different ways. If you feel like, man, I want to believe in God, but I have some big questions. And there are things that I'm not sure I'm going to be able, I don't know if I can do that. But my desire is to love God. The way that we worship in that moment is say, God, I want to love you. Or God, I love you, but that this is going on. Being honest with him. God, I love you, but I don't even know if I want to change this yet. But I want a relationship with you. I know I need help. Guys, this is worship when we can be honest with God and connect with him. And it might feel hard. Right? You might have to sing, whatever it is. It's starting to find those things that have been good, because here's the thing is God knows my heart. So if I have a desire to connect with him, if I have a desire to love him, he knows that. He knows it's hard for me to do some things and not others, right? You get the picture. Find those things that are natural for you and do them. And then also do the things that are hard too, because they're still beneficial to us, because we are celebrating with others. We're still telling God that we love him. We're expressing love to him. But even when we don't enjoy something, it doesn't mean I'm faking it. It's just not as enjoyable to me, right? I'm doing it on faith. Hey, God, I know I'm a terrible singer. That's probably why you said make a joyful noise. I'm being joyful. It just doesn't sound that good, right? Like I promise I'm being, right? He knows my heart. So keep doing those things in order to connect with God. And so this leaves us with the idea of like, how can I actually do this, right? These might be new ways that you're seeing worship. I know for me, this kind of stuff was like mind-blowing. I grew up going to the worship service in the worship center because we worshiped on Sundays. And the worship leader was like, let's worship. I'm like, wow, that word is a lot. And so I was just so familiar with it on Sunday, so familiar with what my parents taught me about, so familiar with what my church did. When I left that, I was like, what do I do? What if I miss church? Can I worship that Sunday? Like, what am I going to do? And it's no fault at all, right? Those are fine things to do. But man, when we have this understanding that it's literally for us to express love to God, it's going to be life-changing for you and I. So here's what this starts to look like. If you're sitting here and you're like, Aaron, I grew up in church. I love worshiping. I love saying I have my stuff. Here's what I want to encourage you to do. If you feel like you understand this and this is encouraging to you that you're doing this, I want to encourage you to continue to connect with God in new ways, maybe some uncomfortable ways, maybe to find ways to be thankful for how God has changed you and where he's carried you through, because I firmly believe you're going to be preparing for the future when maybe something doesn't go so well. You have this experience to look back. God, you were good and you are good. My life is just hard right now, right? It gives you something to look back on and kind of get ahead of that mental game. Start to look and say, God, I'm going to thank you for your love for me. If I have nothing else to worship you for when life gets hard, right? The Bible talks about the joy of salvation, and that has never been more real to me when nothing else seems like it's going to work out. Man, but Christ died for me, and this isn't my home. This isn't my final destination. All of that, right? The joy of my salvation. I encourage you to ask God to continue to transform you, right? Man, God, or ask God to continue to transform you. God, I want to put myself in front of you. I want to be changed. I want my life to continue to change. And here's the easy thing. It's easy for me to do the things that are easy. Sometimes it starts to feel in my life that, man, worship, I struggled with the one, like, worship doesn't always cost me. That's like not super familiar to me. And I started to realize that I really need to think through the idea that, man, I need to tell God, God, I deeply love you, and I want you to work in my life in all the ways that you want to. And I promise you, if you start to pray prayers like that, sometimes it's going to cost you, right? And sometimes I just have to check in, and I'm like, am I just like doing the rhythm thing, or am I actually embracing and putting myself in situations where God would change me? If you're planning on trying this and this is new to you, doing it through the week and taking it out of Sundays, this is all kind of new, I encourage you to just, in a few minutes, the band is going to come up. And I almost did something radical this week where I was like, hey, let's not have music because I don't want people to, I'm like, okay, but then it's just me and that's kind of boring. So, and it's good. I want us to celebrate together. So as the band plays in a little bit, I want you to, one of the great things about worshiping together with music is that you can be singing your heart out, or you can be sitting in your seat and listening, and it gives us space, right? It gives me space to focus on who God is and what he does. And maybe I'm going to take some notes and be like, here's some things that I can do during the week. Here's some ways that I want to try. Maybe I won't do them after I do it once, but that's fine, right? You have freedom to try this. So take that time and do that. And if you're exploring a relationship with Jesus, I want you to think about this. If you're like, I don't know if I want a relationship with Jesus, this is new to me, I'm kind of exploring, I want to figure out what this means for my life. Like, Aaron, I think I'm on board, but I'm not quite sure. That's all right. Here's what I want you to do. Take a look at the Bible. Take one home. Look at how the Bible describes worship of Jesus, right? It's from love. We are not earning a thing. Worship is in response to what God has already done for you and I. And it's us taking the time to express, the first expression of love that each follower of Jesus does is accepting Christ and starting a relationship with him. Because I'm expressing my love to God, saying, God, I need you. I know that you love me so much, and I want to be in relationship with you, right? That is your first step if you're going to have a relationship with Jesus. So I encourage you to look at what that looks like in the Bible. It's different than any other religion that you'll find. Because it's not earning a standing, right? It is in response. It is from love. I want to leave you guys with a verse here, and then I'll pray. But as you do this week, I encourage you to spend some time in prayer to say, God, how am I allowing you to transform my life? What are ways that I can start to worship you that maybe I wouldn't have thought of before? And I don't want to make it sound hokey, like everything you do is worship. But also, what I want you to walk away with is the freedom to do things on your own. If church is the only place that you can do spiritual things and have a relationship with God, it's not right. This is a personal relationship. You should be able to take what you find here and put it into your life the 7 days between now and then. I promise you it'll be different. I think it'll make you feel more connected to Jesus when we start doing this. I think it will help give us a good mindset shift on what worship is. I want to read this verse to you in Psalm 100. If you're looking for something to read, Psalms is a great book to go to see how worship plays out in the ups and downs of life. There's lots of descriptions here. I love this verse in Psalm 100, verses 1 through 5. You can look on the screen or you can turn there if you want. This might be one that you write down and keep with you for a couple weeks here to remember to do this. There is a bunch of examples of worship in here, and it gives you kind of a starting place for other ones. I love what it says here. Shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with gladness. Come before him with joyful songs. Know that the Lord is God. It is he who made us, and we are his. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give thanks to him and praise his name, for the Lord is good, and his love endures forever. His faithfulness continues through all generations. Man, I love the promises that we find here. I love that we can look through here and see examples on how to worship God. And I love that we can see truth that we're celebrating, right? Because it's about God and what he does, right? He is God. He made us and we are his. Man, that's incredible when we start to think about loving God, right? He's going to fight for us. I also love that, man, when we're in tough times, this idea that his love endures forever, right, man? No matter how my life is right now or how it's going to turn out, I know that God's love is steady. I know that, man, however my life turns out, if I can focus on worshiping God in the hard times and when it costs to change my life, his faithfulness, it's going to continue long after I'm gone through generations. I love this example. There's many more of those in Psalms, but I wanted to leave you with this one to kind of contemplate here as the band gives us some time. Guys, I believe if we can do this together, it's going to not only change our idea of worship, but it will give us freedom to connect and express love to God throughout our entire lives, and I think it'll be life-changing for us. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you for your love for us, first of all. God, we're thankful that when we talk about worship, it's not because we have to do something to be okay with you, God. Worship is a natural outflowing of a relationship with you when we realize what you've done for us. God, I love that the different ways that you created us, the things that you've made us good at, all of those things can be worship and how we express love to you. God, thank you that there are things in the Bible that are outlined that we can also do together. Maybe not our most comfortable or our favorite, but Lord, ways that we can celebrate who you are and what you have done for us. God, help us as we navigate life and it can become so difficult. God, our natural instinct is to pull away if we're not in a good place to worship you. Our natural instinct is to not show up. God, you want to meet us where we are. And God, we can very much love you and not be okay with where our life is. You want to help us through that and you want to meet us there. So God, wherever we are with that, help us as we try to make this a part of our lives. Help us as we change our mindset on worship and express love to you, God. Help us with the freedom that we have to find new ways to worship you together and throughout our lives during the week. We love you, Jesus. We're thankful for your work. Amen.